In the rapidly evolving digital landscape where personalities are made and unmade at breakneck speed, few stories capture the complexity of online fame like that of EthanisOnline. Ethan's journey is marked not just by his raw desire for recognition, but also by the compelling narrative of his relentless pursuit of validation, a quest that ultimately led to his downfall. This is the story of a creator whose rise to prominence was only eclipsed by the spectacular nature of his public unraveling. As we delve into the highs and lows, the triumphs and setbacks that define EthanisOnline, we ask, is he a misunderstood creator clinging to relevance? Or has his thirst for approval turned him into a caricature of the very spectacle he once critiqued? It's up to you to decide. Like many storied careers in the digital realm, Ethan's began with ambition, experimentation, and a yearning to stand out. Before controversy and the quest for clout became hallmarks of his brand, Ethan emerged as a relatively obscure content creator in the mid-2010s. Venturing into the chaotic avenues of YouTube, he launched his initial channel under the alias Sora in 2014. Ethan's content was a melange of gaming and commentary, a fusion typical of aspiring YouTubers looking to carve a niche. His ability to turn mundane personal experiences into public spectacles is perhaps one of Ethan's distinguishing traits. A messy breakup with a former collaborator became the catalyst for live-streamed arguments and leaked private messages. This descent into toxic public discourse incited calls for intervention. One particularly infamous incident underscored Ethan's reputation for airing personal vendettas online. In a thinly veiled attempt at revenge, he embarked on a tirade about a former collaborator's struggles, claiming they were ill-equipped to handle the pressures of digital notoriety. Such moments cemented his persona as more than a mere content creator in decline. Ethan had become a full-blown online spectacle, drawing viewers more for his explosive personal drama than for the content he produced. Ethan's controversies transcend personal drama, manifesting in disturbing patterns of behavior linked to his perpetual need to control his narrative. In one significant live stream, Ethan vented for nearly 2 hours over a subreddit dedicated to mocking him, accusing its members of ruining his life. Yet paradoxically, he doubled down on the very behaviors that fueled their criticism. In his desperation to maintain relevance, Ethan resorted to clout-chasing tactics. He inflated drama involving predator hunters like Alex Rosen, while repeatedly attacking prominent figures such as Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson. The essence of his content morphed into a factory of outrage rather than authentic critique. Ethan's cycle of hypocrisy was evident. He would defend fat-shaming jokes at one instant, only to rage against similar caricatures aimed at him the next. Amidst this whirlwind, Ethan drew inspiration from creators like Ethan Klein of H3H3 Productions and iDubbbz, known for their edge and satirical commentary. These influences permeated Ethan's style, though his initial forays into content creation paled in controversy compared to what followed. Ethan's introduction into the world of YouTube content creation formally kicked off in 2017 with his first publicly available video, The Gearspiracy.
But not too long ago, Mr. Gear posted a video. Experiment! Glowing 1000-degree knife versus Coca-Cola! And posted this at the perfect time because with YouTube's random tweaking of the algorithm, the shit was plastered everywhere. Couldn't escape it. It's madness. He seems to be the epitome of awful clickbait. He's got it down to a formula and it works. He really knows how to up the ante in his thumbnails too. Go from 1 lighter to 3 lighter to 4 lighter. How the are these life hacks? Why?
This video showcased young Ethan's commentary on YouTuber Mr. Gear, notorious for clickbaity thumbnails. The video, while humorous, was a stark contrast to how his content would evolve. Early supporters lamented this transition from genuinely funny content to the more controversial persona he became. Collaboration played a pivotal role in Ethan's early years. By 2018, he was working with rising YouTuber Nick is Not Green, significantly contributing as an editor. Ethan's Q&A reflections highlighted his pride in this role, claiming he edited approximately 40% of Nick's second channel videos. Such partnerships honed Ethan's technical skills and afforded him exposure to evolving YouTube algorithms and trends. However, even during these formative years, hints of his future direction were evident: a tendency to prioritize metrics over meaningful commentary, the relentless pursuit of views and engagement, often at the expense of substance, characterized Ethan's creative process, known within the community as the Clout Mindset.
Barcelona asked, how many people do you edit for? I only edit for one person other than myself, and that's Nick. I edit I'd say 40% of the second channel videos that he puts out. I could not be happier or luckier to be in.
For Ethan, this approach wasn't explicit but quietly pervasive, planting seeds of sensationalism beneath the surface of his content. His experiments with eye-catching thumbnails, provocative titles, and strategic uploads signaled a burgeoning awareness of YouTube's power dynamics. The ethos of creators like Ethan Klein, a precise balance of humor, shock value, and critique, formed a blueprint for EthanisOnline's destiny. Next came Ethan's immersion into BreadTube, a step marked by evolving content. Initially a gaming and commentary creator, Ethan transitioned into political commentary inspired by BreadTube stalwarts like H-Bomber Guy. BreadTube, heralded as a haven for progressive creators, emerged as a counterbalance to the alt-right narrative of the mid-2010s. It presented itself as a force for inclusivity, progressive values, and critical thought. Yet, despite its noble intentions, BreadTube existed enshrouded in contradictions, with Ethan becoming a vivid illustration of its inherent flaws. BreadTube rose to prominence by promoting inclusivity and addressing topics like LGBTQ+ rights, capitalism critiques, and racial equality. However, its inclusive message often clashed with an inclination for creating division. Some creators relied on ridiculing others and taking extreme moral stances to advance their opinions.
Critique is really just opinion, but a lot of people let right-wing propaganda cloud their judgment of modern art, whether they realize it or not. All because it helps them feel better in not wanting to engage with it. In an ideal conservative world, art is interpreted for people through a YouTube video full of lying, misinformation, emotional manipulation, false comparisons, but this
blend of welcoming values and divisive behavior became one of BreadTube's notable contradictions, of which Ethan was a prominent case study. Ethan aimed to establish himself as a progressive voice through satirical critiques of easy targets like Ben Shapiro and platforms like the Babylon Bee. These subjects were deliberately selected for their notoriety, ensuring engagement from an audience eager for takedowns of conservative figures. By engaging with these topics, Ethan tapped into BreadTube's formula for virality, striking a tone that satirized his subjects while echoing the values of his intended audience. Yet, as Ethan delved deeper into this space, cracks in his approach and BreadTube's model began to emerge. The contradictions that plagued the movement became glaring in Ethan's content. Often, his critiques relied on personal attacks and exaggerated language, alienating those outside his echo chamber. A telling example of Ethan's approach was his critique of Ben Shapiro. Instead of addressing Shapiro's arguments, Ethan mocked his mannerisms and voice. Though some found this comedic, it underscored BreadTube's tendency towards selective inclusivity, welcoming those who agreed, but ridiculing dissenters. BreadTube's selective outrage was another contradiction Ethan frequently typified. Progressive creators swiftly criticized conservative figures for edgy humor while often indulging in similar behavior themselves. An illustrative incident involved 9/11 jokes, typically taboo under the moral code Ethan professed to uphold. BreadTube, and by extension Ethan, endeavored to justify such moments as punching up rather than punching down. However, this reasoning often fell flat, highlighting the hypocrisy and alienating audiences who viewed it as insincere. Ethan's pivot to sanitized humor highlighted BreadTube's limitations. In an effort to align with the movement's values, he stripped his content of the edginess that initially attracted viewers. This move endeared him to the BreadTube audience, but narrowed his appeal, fostering an environment that discouraged dissent or critical thought. His comment sections became echo chambers where viewers simply parroted his perspectives. At the core of Ethan's respective BreadTube phase was a performative outrage, a strategic display of moral indignation designed to elicit validation from his audience. While he often critiqued others for perceived lapses in judgment, Ethan himself engaged in similar behaviors, leveraging controversy to sustain relevance. A notable illustration occurred when he lambasted conservative satire on art as disgusting, while simultaneously joking about sensitive topics. Ethan's time within BreadTube did more than reveal the contradictions of the movement. It underscored its darker tendencies. By emphasizing sanitized humor, selective outrage, and performative morality, Ethan alienated broader audiences while fostering an echo chamber that stifled meaningful discourse. In this process, he became not only a participant in BreadTube's flaws, but one of its most glaring examples, a figure whose rise and fall mirrored the intrinsic issues of the very movement he sought to emulate. One of Ethan's most notable controversies stemmed from his stance on porn addiction. In a video, Ethan dismissed it as an overblown phenomenon, using outdated studies to support his position. Porn isn't an addiction like crack. You can stop that anytime you want, he argued. He framed societal concern over excessive porn use as moral panic rather than legitimate health issue. The controversy intensified with Ethan's critique of the NoFap movement, where advocates promote reduced porn consumption and abstinence to improve mental health, relationships, and self-discipline. Ethan derided the NoFap movement as an offshoot of incel culture, labeling its supporters as socially inept outcasts incapable of forming healthy relationships. His hyperbolic comments like, "These guys are just ashamed they have to masturbate because they can't get laid," painted NoFap with a broad, dismissive brush. While Ethan positioned himself as an advocate for self-acceptance, critics contended that his take lacked the nuance required to address such complex topics. His critique seemed particularly controversial due to its hypocrisy. Ethan presented himself as a champion of self-awareness and open dialogue, yet his handling of the NoFap movement revealed a reluctance to engage with perspectives that clashed with his worldview, reducing intricate discussions about addiction and personal growth to simplistic conclusions. This trend toward polarizing content extended beyond the NoFap controversy. Ethan's pivot towards political discourse often prioritized dramatic declarations over nuanced discussions, aligning him with BreadTube's echo chambers but alienating others. His growing reliance on inflammatory rhetoric mirrored a deeper radicalization favoring metrics over genuine dialogue. Ethan's contradictions became even more apparent through his handling of sensitive topics and his use of inflammatory language. Nowhere was this more evident than in his approach to predator hunting controversies, his double standards regarding humor, and his tendency to shield problematic figures for political gain. One of the most polarizing episodes in Ethan's career revolved around his critique of Alex Rosen, a prominent online predator hunter connected with exposing EDP-445. A disgraced creator caught attempting to meet a minor. Rather than lauding Rosen's efforts in revealing predatory behavior, Ethan shifted his critique towards Rosen, making incendiary claims that frame Rosen's methods as harassment. So he and his weird little cameraman are harassing EDP, asking dumb questions like, "Why do you do this?" Ethan elaborated. In one particularly inflammatory segment, Ethan even labeled Rosen's conduct as predatory, stating he's no better than the people he claims to expose. These assertions sparked widespread backlash, not just from Rosen's supporters, but also from Ethan's followers, who questioned his motives in denouncing someone working to uncover dangerous individuals. Critics widely perceived Ethan's accusations as unfounded, indicative of bad faith, an attempt to discredit Rosen rather than engage in meaningful critique of predator hunting. Ethan's tone came across as defensive, especially given EDP 445's documented actions, which were far more heinous than any offense Ethan accused Rosen of. His double standards exacerbated his controversies. While condemning Rosen for alleged harassment, Ethan's commentary was littered with personal attacks and inflammatory language, exposing glaring hypocrisy when viewed in light of his former stances against edgy humor and objectionable jokes. The outcome from these contradictions was severe. Ethan's audience began to fracture as longtime viewers expressed disillusionment with his increasingly shallow and lazy content. His critiques often lacked depth, relying on superficial arguments and cherry-picked evidence. Instead of thorough research, Ethan leaned heavily on personality and emotional appeals, further alienating viewers expecting meaningful analysis. The React Streamer debate encapsulated Ethan's controversies, exposing his bias and shaky comprehension of content creation ethics. At its core were Ethan's assertions that even the most minimal reaction content could be valid provided it was made in good faith. Ethan's defense of reaction streamers like Hassan and Denims was criticized as simplistic, lacking meaningful engagement or transformation required for content to pass fair use standards. During one live stream, Ethan defended Hassan and Denims, claiming their commentary added value simply by presenting material to their audiences. Yet this perspective faced pushback. As critics noted, many reaction streams lacked commentary, effectively becoming unauthorized rebroadcasts. A notorious clip of Hassan eating on stream as the original content played uninterrupted became a flashpoint for critics. Ethan's framing of the issue around curation over transformation was dismissed as deflection. His ideological bias was glaring, aligning him with reaction streamers not on defense of their practices, but shared ideology. By refusing to acknowledge their content's shortcomings, Ethan appeared more interested in protecting allies than engaging in ethical discussions, reinforcing perceptions of bias. This bias became apparent when compared with his condemnation of reaction streamers like XQC and Pokimane for lazy, exploitative content. Such selective application of criticism undermined Ethan's credibility by appearing to shield ideological allies while condemning others for identical practices. Ethan's critiques soon extended into comedic commentary, revealing weaknesses in his analytical approach and double standards. The video "TikTok Has a Comedian Problem" became a focal point for criticism, deriding darker, provocative humor as emblematic of a modern comedy decline. Yet Ethan's analysis suffered for its shallowness and ideological selectivity. Within the video, Ethan criticized TikTok comedians using dark humor, deeming them unoriginal. Highlighted was his critique of Jimmy Carr, a comedian known for wit and provocative material. In Ethan's view, Carr's repartee epitomized offensive jokes, cushioning lazy humor. It's just shock value disguised as comedy, Ethan ridiculed, using Carr's heckler handling as evidence of comedic mediocrity. Yet, Carr's adeptness at navigating tense moments was praised by fans. Ethan dismissed it as lazy, inadvertently illustrating a broader issue, prioritizing easy targets over meaningful critique. TikTok comedians, often amateurs experimenting in public, became convenient scapegoats for Ethan's narrative of cultural decline. Ethan's content skewed towards an echo chamber, appealing primarily to progressively aligned audiences. His critiques and commentary, framed around issues resonating with this core base, solidified a voice of reason in such circles. However, this narrow focus entailed drawbacks, as wider audiences perceived Ethan's content as sanitized and selective. Criticism of Ethan grew as he leaned into a victim complex, deflecting accountability while garnering audience sympathy. This tactic surfaced when he invoked personal traumas amid backlash, positioning himself as misunderstood to rally audience defense. For instance, during the Alex controversy, Ethan invoked his CSA experience as justification. This victim narrative presented Ethan as resilient against unjust critique, yet it also cultivated a toxic environment where dissent was met with hostility, reinforcing an echo chamber. Ethan manipulated his audience by priming them against other creators, framing criticism as attacks on shared values and weaponizing this loyalty against detractors. Yet this strategy was dual-edged, as Ethan's audience eventually turned scrutiny inward, holding him to rigid standards. Incidents of hypocrisy or missteps met backlash from supporters, empowered to critique using the moral framework Ethan espoused. Hypocrisy permeated Ethan's performative progressivism. Positioning himself as a voice for marginalized communities, Ethan discussed issues like racial inequality and LGBTQ+ rights, yet advocacy was often superficial, more about boosting credibility than enacting change. Discussions served as video talking points, offering limited depth on serious matters. One glaring contradiction in Ethan's content was selective outrage. He applied moral standards inconsistently depending on critique targets, notably around offensive humor. Ethan condemned jokes he deemed harmful, particularly from politically right creators, yet tolerated similarly edgy humor from ideological allies. And for instance, Ethan condemned comedian Steven Crowder's joke about immigrant deaths as tasteless, yet dismissed backlash against progressive humorous joke about white casualties as overly sensitive. Inconsistencies prompted viewers to question why Ethan failed to scrutinize humor aligned with progressive values. On personal matters, Ethan often mocked creators for physical attributes, framing jokes as harmless humor. Yet during his feud with Alex Rosen, Ethan resorted to personal insults over appearance. Hypocrisy revealed itself when Ethan became the target of similar criticisms, exposing double standards. This facade of progressivism extended to Ethan's conflicts with fellow creators, notably Sensitive Society. The latter's commentary criticized radical elements, including fat activism and extremism. Ethan opposed this view, claiming Sensitive Society's content facilitated right-wing radicalization. Ethan engaged in a live debate with Sensitive Society, intended as meaningful dialogue but devolved into chaos. Accusations and emotional appeals undermined Ethan's argument, revealing reluctance to engage in good faith. The confrontation highlighted two criticisms. Conflating commentary with societal issues weakened Ethan's stance, and emotional appeals undermined credibility. Ethan's contentious approach to modern art elicited further clashes, notably with Moist Critical. Ethan argued art is inherently political, with modern art propagandizing rather than expressing. Yet, he hypocritically derided art he disagreed with, reducing critiques to personal biases. Ethan's attack on Moist Critical targeted perceived anti-intellectualism, clashing with Moist Critical's advocacy for genuine connection over pretentious interpretation. The feud exposed Ethan's inconsistencies, as his arguments relied more on personal biases than a substantial critique. EthanisOnline story transcends personal failing, unveiling structural pitfalls in online activism. Digital spaces reward creators catering to algorithms and trending topics over nuance and engagement, reflected through Ethan's downfall. His rise and fall embody pressures faced by creators to produce influential yet controversial content that sparks outrage, reinforces tribalism, prioritizes virality over value. Thus, Ethan is not merely an outlier, but a symbol of wider cultural issues, representative of an environment that enabled both his ascendancy and subsequent decline. Addressing these systemic concerns offers potential for moving beyond noise to cultivate more meaningful exchanges of ideas in digital discourse.